The silence after her last shot was heavier than the weight of the ruins themselves. The men crouched low, their nerves stretched thin, each one straining for the faintest sound. The young soldier's hands trembled against his rifle, sweat dripping down his brow, though the night air was cold. He whispered into the comms, asking if she was certain one was down, his voice cracking with the need for reassurance. She gave no answer, only kept her eyes fixed through her scope. Her breath calm her, body still, and that silence told them more than words could. The captain pressed his back against the broken wall, his chest rising and falling in sharp rhythm, his mind racing through possibilities he wanted to believe, her wanted to trust that her bullet had cut one phantom from the shadows, but the shot that nearly struck his head moments later made belief difficult. The ruins were still alive with death unseen and unyielding. The captain clenched his jaw, his fury held behind clenched teeth. As he signaled the squad to hold firm, the older soldier muttered curses under his breath, his nerves shaking him more than the cold he had seen combat before he had watched men fall. Yet this was different. It was the waiting that gnawed at him. The waiting that stretched seconds into hours. The captain snapped his fingers against his arm, a sharp motion demanding silence. But the older soldier's breath still rasped loud enough to betray his fear. From the darkness came the faint scrape again, metal shifting, stone cracking under slow, deliberate movement. The men flinched, rifles raising too quickly, their panic betraying them. The captain hissed low through his teeth to steady, but the command barely reached their bones before another shot rang out, shattering stone inches from their cover. The echo rolled across the ruins, mocking their helplessness, their nerves fraying further with each unanswered sound. She shifted, then her body sliding low across the dust, her rifle trained steady, her eyes unblinking through the scope. Her voice came calm through the comms, move left 3 paces, hold angle, cover north. The words carried weight sharper than orders. Her tone was not suggestion, it was certainty, and the captain obeyed without question, signaling the others to shift with him, their boots grinding against gravel each step, a drumbeat in the silence. The young soldier whispered again, saying he felt the eyes on him, the crosshairs pressing like a blade to the back of his neck, his voice rising with panic. But she cut him short, whispering steady breath, steady hands. You are not marked unless you believe it. Her words sliced through his fear, her calmness lending him strength. He tightened his grip, exhaled slowly, and steadied. His scope, though, his heart hammered louder than thunder. The ruins groaned once more. A shadow flickered in the dust, too faint for most eyes, but not for hers. Her rifle barked, the night split by the roar. The men ducked low, expecting another reply, but none came this time. Silence followed, heavier, deeper, stretching like a wound across the field. The squad looked toward her, their breaths shallow, their hope fragile, and she whispered again, low, certain, 2 down. The older soldier shook his head, muttering that it was impossible no sniper could pick shadows from dust, with such precision, his disbelief boiling with fear. But the captain silenced him with a glare he wanted to doubt. But he had seen the steadiness in her eyes and the steel. In her breath, he knew she was not guessing she was playing the same deadly game as the unseen predator, and for the first time he felt a sliver of control returning to them. Yet before relief could settle, the ruins answered once more another shot, cracking through the night, but this time it struck flesh. The older soldier cried out, collapsing against the stone, clutching his arm, blood seeping between his fingers. The squad scrambled, dragging him back behind cover, their breaths ragged there, fear surging again. The captain gritted his teeth, pressing hard against the wound, ordering silence, though the man's groans cut through the air. The sniper in the shadows had reminded them brutally the game was not finished. The trap had only tightened. The captain's fury threatened to break loose, but he steadied himself, his eyes finding hers once more. Her rifle still fixed, her eyes still calm. She whispered, "Do not falter. That is what they want." Her words carved into the silence, holding the men from collapse, anchoring them when their faith threatened to shatter. The wounded soldier clenched his teeth, his blood dripping on the dust. His breathing sharp, yet even in his pain he stared at her and whispered, "How do you know this? How can you be so certain?" She did not answer him. Her silence was not cruelty. It was focus. Her rifle remained fixed. Her eyes narrowed, her breath steady. And in that silence he found a strange strength. He pressed his hand harder against the wound and quieted. Captain ordered the squad to shift again, their formation breaking wider to avoid clustering. He signaled angles to cover every ruin. Every shadow the men obeyed. Though their steps were heavy with fear, the young soldier took his place again, his scope sweeping the dust, his breath steadying this time, repeating her words in his head. Steady breath, steady hands. The ruins groaned again, another faint shift of stone, another scrape of metal. The men tensed, rifles aimed, hearts pounding. The captain raised his hand to steady, but before he could, her rifle thundered once more, dust exploding from a distant wall, silence following sharp and final, and then she whispered low into the comms, "3 down." The men stared at her, stunned their disbelief, battling their desperate need to believe. The captain's eyes locked on hers, his breath catching in his throat. He wanted to ask if it was over, if the field was theirs again, but he did not, because deep in the silence, he already knew the answer. The night was not finished, and if 3 had, the night held its breath, the ruins frozen under the weight of silence. The men crouched low, their rifles trembling in their hands, their eyes wide with the shock of her last whisper. 3 down, yet none dared to believe the danger had ended. The young soldier pressed his cheek to the scope, scanning the shattered horizon, but saw only shadows stretching endless across the broken stones. His breath came slow yet heavy, and in his chest the fear grew. Not lighter, but sharper. The captain pressed against the wall, his mind racing. He wanted to trust her calm certainty, wanted to believe that the field was theirs again. Yet every instinct screamed that the game was not finished. He clenched his fists, his jaw tight. He whispered into the comms hold, "Steady watch every angle. No one moves without signal." His voice hard, yet low, the words carrying weight, though they were brittle under the strain of doubt. She did not move, her body still, her rifle steady, her eye pressed to the glass, her breathing smooth like the rhythm of tide against stone. She whispered nothing. Yet her silence spoke louder than orders. It told the men that she felt the same truth. The captain had felt that the field was not empty, that a shadow still lingered watching, waiting, the silence stretching into a coil wound tighter with each second. Then came the sound, faint but clear, the deliberate crack of stone under weight, too heavy to be wind, too sharp to be accident. The men stiffened, rifles snapping toward the noise, but the captain hissed low to hold fire. The sound had not come from the ruins. It had come from behind them, from the ridge that overlooked the entire valley. The realization struck hard and cold. The sniper had not been alone. The sniper had been above. The young soldier turned sharply, his scope sweeping toward the ridge, his breath caught in his throat. He saw nothing but darkness yet. He felt it, the weight of eyes pressing against him like a knife laid. Across skin, he whispered into the comms ridge, "High Ridge North." The words rushed trembling, and the squad shifted their rifles upward, hearts hammering in their ears. The silence held one breath, 2, and then it shattered. A shot cracked down from the ridge stone, exploding near their cover. The men ducked, the older soldier groaning in pain as dust filled their lungs. The captain shouted for positions, his voice sharp, his authority cutting through the chaos. Yet another shot rang out, striking closer. This time deliberate, not wild, each shot walking them into panic. She remained still, her rifle now angling upward, her scope sweeping the ridge, her breath steady. Though the men shook around her, she whispered calm and low, one voice, one rifle, her certainty, freezing the panic that clawed at them. The captain nodded, his teeth clenched, signaling the men to hold while she studied the darkness. The ridge stretched long, jagged shadows cutting across the stars, but her eye searched with patient precision, her finger brushing the trigger, her breath slowing until her heart felt silent. Another shot ripped the night, this one carving through the edge of the wall, spraying stone across her cheek. Yet she did not flinch. Her scope locked, her eye narrowing. The faintest glimmer caught in the glass of her lens, a reflection too sharp to belong to the rock, she whispered, "I see you," and pulled the trigger. Her rifle thundered, shaking the silence to dust. The ridge erupted in dust and echo. The squad held, their breath-waiting hearts frozen in their throats. Seconds stretched endless. The silence pressed heavy. Then from the ridge came a sound none of them expected. Not another shot, but a voice. A low laugh carried down through the wind, sharp, cold, deliberate. The captain's blood chilled. The men froze listening. The laughter rolled over them like a wave. It was not defeat, it was challenge. She lowered her rifle just slightly, her eyes narrowing, her body still. The captain hissed into the comms. "What did? You hit. What did you see?" But she gave no answer, her silence telling them more than words. Her shot had not ended. The predator. It had only drawn them closer. The laughter faded into silence again. The ridge dark, and the silence after the second shot pressed harder than the first. The men huddled behind the broken wall, their rifles tight against their shoulders, their eyes darting across the ruined field, every heartbeat sounding louder than footsteps. The captain kept his hand raised to steady them, but even his breathing betrayed the weight of dread that filled the night. They all knew the sniper was out there watching every move, measuring every breath. The young soldier pressed his cheek to his scope, his hands slick with sweat as he scanned the jagged ruins. He whispered that he saw nothing but shadows and broken stone, yet he felt the crosshairs of an unseen rifle resting on him. His words carried fear but not weakness, and the men heard it in his voice, the truth that none of them could deny. They were not the hunters here. They were the hunted. She remained silent. Her rifle fixed, her eyes locked through the scope, her body, a statue of patience, while the others twitched at every sound she did not blink. She did not waver. She scanned every shadow with the calmness of someone who had faced this game before. The captain glanced at her briefly and saw in her stillness something deeper, something dangerous, something that told him she had already understood what kind of enemy they faced. A stone clattered softly from the far end of the ruins, a faint echo drifting across the silence. One of the older soldiers flinched and raised his rifle higher, his nerves betraying him. The captain hissed low through clenched teeth to hold steady, but the sound carried enough to make the squad tighten in fear. The enemy was not firing but listening, testing, waiting each noise from them, giving away pieces of their control. The commander studied the terrain through narrowed eyes. He had fought ambushes. He had fought traps. But this felt different, deliberate, surgical, as if the sniper was carving the night into pieces for them to choke on. He whispered into the comms for the squad to split and circle wide, but hesitation gripped them. The men knew that movement meant exposure, and exposure meant death. The young soldier was the first to obey, sliding low along the broken ground. His breath shallow, his body tight, he moved like prey across the jagged stones, his rifle raised in front of him. The others watched his shadow vanish into the dust, the silence holding heavier. With each inch he covered, then, without warning, another shot cracked across the night, striking stone inches from his arm, deliberate again, not to kill, but to remind them all who controlled the field. The soldier froze, his body trembling against the ground, his breath ragged, his comms filling with silence. The sniper could have ended him in that instant, yet chose not to. And that truth was more terrifying than the shot itself. The captain's jaw clenched as he ordered him back to cover his voice sharp but low. The soldier obeyed, sliding back quickly, his eyes wide with terror, the squad pulling him behind. "The wall once more," she whispered. Then her voice calm and sharp like the crack of steel. She said the shots were too precise, too restrained. She said they were not fighting a lone gun. They were facing a predator who wanted them alive long enough to break them. Her words hung heavy in the comms, the men shifting uneasily, their fear now sharpened into realization they were inside a game, not a firefight. The captain understood it too. Though he did not want to admit it, he had seen marksmen before, but never one who fired warnings with such control, never one who drew out the silence like a blade pressing to the throat. He glanced again at her steady eyes, her unwavering hands, and he realized she was not just calm, she was waiting for the chance to answer the game with her own. Another sound came from the ruins, the faint scrape of metal against stone like a rifle being shifted into position. The men stiffened their rifles, snapping toward the sound, but she whispered no, wait, and in that breath, the captain held his hand to steady them. Her voice carried weight enough to silence even the pounding of their hearts, her stillness commanding them in ways orders never could. The ruins shifted again, dust rolling through the air, shadows stretching. Across the broken ground, the sniper was moving, but never revealing himself. Each sound, deliberate each step, calculated. The men strained their eyes through the dark, but saw nothing, their nerves unraveling with every second. The captain felt the night slipping further from his grasp, his own authority fractured by the unseen enemy that held them pinned. She adjusted her rifle ever so slightly, her scope narrowing on a distant corner of rubble, her finger brushing the trigger, her breath steady. The captain watched her through the corner of his eye and saw the faintest glimmer of certainty on her face. He realized then that while the sniper toyed with them, she was hunting too silent, deliberate, patient. The men waited, their rifles aimed, their bodies trembling, their nerves close to breaking, the silence pressed like a crushing weight, until at last another shot rang out, cutting the air with precision. But this time, before the echo even faded, she squeezed her trigger, her rifle roaring. Into the night, the two shots colliding in the silence like thunder dust exploded from the ruins. The squad ducked, their hearts hammering, the captain's eyes snapping toward her, knowing she had not fired wild, knowing she had seen something. None of them could. The silence returned again, heavier than before, but this time it carried with it a new tension, not of fear, but of the unknown answer. Had she hit her mark, or had the predator only shifted deeper into the shadows? And as the men held, their breath waiting for the truth to reveal itself, the captain whispered one word, barely audible yet sharp enough to pierce the silence: move. The echo of her shot still lingered across the ruins like a tremor holding the air captive. The squad pressed deeper into their cover, their rifles tight, their eyes wide with fear and anticipation. The dust from the shattered stone hung heavy, drifting like smoke around them. The captain did not move, his eyes fixed on her steady form, his mind turning through possibilities. Had she struck true, or had the phantom simply shifted into another shadow? She did not answer their unspoken doubts. Her rifle remained fixed, her cheek pressed firm against the stock, her eyes unblinking through the scope. Her finger resting, calm near the trigger, her breath steady. She was a statue carved in the heart of chaos. Her silence was heavier than commands. It spoke of certainty even when none of them could see it. The captain understood then that she was reading a game they could not yet fathom. From the far side of the ruins, a faint sound drifted low, a cough of stone collapsing, a fragment falling where no wind could reach. The captain raised his hand sharply. The men froze, their weapons trained on the shifting dust, the silence between each breath unbearable. Then a flicker of movement too swift to trace a shadow, bending from one broken wall to the next. The men fired bursts into the void, but their bullets met only stone, their nerves unraveling with each Missed shot, the young soldier whispered into the comms, his voice shaking. He said he felt the crosshairs on him again, as though unseen eyes had returned to mark him. The captain clenched his teeth. He knew the sniper had survived her shot and was still in control, yet something was different. The silence was not as composed as before. The movement had been rushed, forced. The predator had been touched by her bullet, even if not felled, she whispered. Then a single word, shift her voice low, but, sharp enough to cut through their panic, she began sliding along the edge of cover. Her body pressed low against the ground, her rifle never wavering. The captain hesitated, but something in her precision compelled him. He ordered the men to spread, wider to create new angles of fire, their boots pressed slow against the rubble, each step louder in their ears than the wind itself. The ruins answered again, another crack of stone, another ghost of movement, but this time her rifle barked without hesitation. The shot thundered through the night. The squad flinched but held their ground. The silence that followed stretched long, too long, and then came a reply, not from one rifle, but from two sharp cracks splitting the air from different angles. The men ducked hard. Realizing the truth too late, there was not one sniper, there were at least two. Fear surged through the squad. One of the older soldiers cursed under his breath. The young one whispered that they were finished, but she only adjusted. Her scope again, her voice calm as steel. She said they were not finished. They were chosen, and that sent chills through them all. The captain felt it deep in his bones. This was no random ambush. They had been drawn into a hunt laid out by masters of the craft. The men exchanged glances, their fear boiling into confusion. Their trust fractured, yet the captain steadied them, his voice low firm, commanding them to lock angles to cover one another, to trust the silence of their comrade who now moved. Like Shadow herself, her rifle sweeping every ruin, every stone, her eyes alive with the thrill of a duel. Only she seemed to understand. The ruins erupted again, dust flying as another shot slammed into stone inches from the young soldier. He shouted, but held firm, returning fire wild into the dark. His bullets tearing at broken walls, she whispered sharply. Hold fire, conserve your breath. Conserve your aim. Her command steadied him, though his hands shook, his eyes wide with the weight of invisible, crosshairs pressing on him. The captain leaned against the wall, his mind racing, his authority tested by an enemy he could not see. Yet he looked again at her. The calm etched into her every movement, and he realized she was not merely surviving. She was leading without words. Her duel was not just with the hidden snipers. It was with the fear that threatened to consume them all. Her presence kept them anchored when the shadows threatened to drown them. Then Kay. The night was thick with smoke and silence. The battlefield stretched across broken ground and shattered stone. The SEAL team moved like shadows, their breath steady, their rifles tight. The mission had drained them, worn them down to their very core. The SEAL captain stood at the center, his eyes scanning the horizon, his voice low as he whispered the words that carried like a final breath. It is over. Yet the silence that followed did not feel like victory. Around him, the men began to lower their rifles, their shoulders easing as though the weight of the mission had finally slipped from them. Some even dared to breathe relief into the night. Yet one of them, a young soldier with eyes too sharp for exhaustion, kept his gaze fixed on the distance. He felt something in the dark, something that moved beyond the edges of the quiet. He gripped his rifle tighter but said nothing because the captain had declared the fight done, and who could challenge such words? The wind shifted, carrying with it the faint metallic taste of blood and the acrid scent of powder. The captain closed his eyes for a moment, letting his breath steady, letting the thought of safety sink in. But the field around him felt wrong too, still too quiet, the kind of quiet that pressed against the chest and warned of things unseen. He opened his eyes again and scanned the shadows, knowing deep down that silence was rarely merciful. In the far distance, the ruins groaned beneath the weight of the wind. A wall collapsed, softly scattering dust into the air. The men turned their heads briefly, but relaxed again, believing it was nothing but broken stone settling. Yet she noticed it too. The lone woman among them, her eyes sharp, her hands calm. She did not ease her rifle. She did not lower her guard. She stared at the shifting ruin as though waiting for it to breathe. The captain whispered again, softer this time, convincing himself as much as his men. "It is finished." His words carried into the dark, but the night did not answer him. It seemed to listen. It seemed to wait. The young soldier who had kept his eyes forward shifted uneasily, his finger brushing the trigger, his breath shallow. He felt the weight of something beyond the ruins, watching them holding still. As they stood exposed in the open, the air thickened. The men spoke little, their bodies weary, their minds craving rest. The captain raised a hand to signal them to hold position, his authority unquestioned, yet behind his command there lived an unease he could not silence. He had seen too many nights end in ambush, too many whispers of victory swallowed by sudden fire. Still, he told himself it was over. Still, he let the words sit heavy in the air. Then it came, a sound sharp and sudden splitting. The silence in 2-1 shot, ringing through the night, so precise, so deliberate, it cut through the relief like a blade. The men dropped instantly, their rifles rising, their bodies pressed against the ground, hearts pounding in their chests. The captain froze for a fraction of a second. The echo of his words still in his ears, his whisper of it is over, shattered before him as the truth unfolded. He turned his head slowly, his eyes sweeping the distance, scanning the shadows, the ruins, the shifting air, each breath heavier than the last. His men whispered questions, their voices thin with fear and disbelief. But he gave no answer. He only kept searching, kept waiting for the second shot that would follow. The young soldier who had sensed it before was already moving his rifle, locked his eyes sharp. He whispered to the others that the first shot was never the last. But before he could finish his warning, the night shifted again. The ruins stirred, and every man knew the silence had been broken. Forever. And in that broken silence, they realized the mission was not finished. The fight was not over, and the one shot had only begun to tell the story of what was waiting in the dark. The echo of the shot lingered in the night, like a ghost clinging. To the air, the men held their rifles, high eyes darting across the ruined horizon, hearts pounding with the sudden realization that the captain's whisper of closure had been a lie. The silence that returned was not relief, it was a trap, and each soldier felt the weight of it pressing against their chest like an unseen hand tightening with every second. The captain crouched low, his fingers brushing the dirt, his ears straining for the next sound, his mind racing through possibilities, yet nothing came. No second shot, no flash, no movement. Only the kind of quiet that came before storms. He motioned for the squad to spread out their boots, pressing against the stone and gravel with careful steps, each one moving like prey in a hunting field. The young soldier who had sensed danger earlier kept his scope fixed on the ruins, his breath shallow, his heart loud in his ears. He whispered into the comms that he had seen something shifting behind the broken wall, but his words were dismissed as nerves by one of the older men still shaken from the first shot. Yet the captain did not dismiss it. He had felt the same disturbance deep in his bones, and his silence confirmed the unease. She remained apart from them, her rifle pressed to her shoulder, her eyes unblinking, staring through the scope into the void of stone and shadow. She had not spoken once since the shot rang out. But her stillness was louder than any voice, her posture, tight, her finger near the trigger, ready as though she had known from the beginning that this night was not over. Her silence was not fear, it was patience, and the others began to sense it. The ruins groaned again, a faint scrape of stone against stone. the wind shifting dust across the broken ground. The sound so slight it could have been dismissed yet in the tension. It was enough to lock every man into stillness. The captain raised his hand to halt their steps, his eyes narrowing into the darkness where the sound had come from. He whispered, "Into the comms, steady your aim." The moment stretched thin, each second a blade waiting to cut through them. Then it came another shot, but not toward them. This time, it struck the dirt a few meters ahead. Deliberate, intentional, a warning, not a kill. Shot the men froze their confusion mixing with dread. Someone was out there controlling the pace of this hunt, playing with them rather than striking them down. The captain knew it instantly, and his jaw tightened with fury. He signaled for them to take cover behind the broken wall of a half-collapsed building, their boots crunching softly as they slid into position, rifles aimed outward, the air growing colder with every breath. The young soldier pressed against the stone, whispered that they were being tested, that the enemy was measuring their fear. The captain heard it, and though he gave no answer, his silence was agreement. She shifted her aim slowly, her rifle sweeping across the horizon. Her eyes never blinking, her hands never trembling. She adjusted her scope just enough to catch the faintest glimmer in the dark, a reflection of glass too precise to be stone. She breathed out softly and whispered one word into the calm sniper, her voice so calm it sent a chill through the men, because they realized she had seen what none of them could. The captain turned sharply, his eyes meeting hers across the cover, her calmness cutting through his fury. He signaled for suppression fire, and the squad responded, unleashing a wave of bullets. Into the ruins, stone exploding, dust filling the air, the echoes bouncing across the field. Yet even through the chaos, no return fire came, only silence heavier than before. And in that silence, the truth sank deeper. The sniper was still there, watching, waiting, choosing not to respond. The dust cleared slowly, the ruins standing jagged and broken. The men shifting nervously, their rifles still raised. The captain clenched his teeth and whispered into the comms that this was no ordinary shooter, no careless threat. This was someone precise, someone patient, someone who wanted them to know they were never in control. He felt the weight of that realization pressing against him, harder than the night itself. The young soldier kept scanning his scope. Shaking with adrenaline, he whispered that they should retreat, but the captain cut him off with a sharp motion. Retreat meant surrender, and surrender was death. They would not walk away from this without understanding who lurked in the shadows. He looked again at her calm figure, her finger steady on the trigger, her eyes locked forward, and he knew she was waiting for the moment to strike. The ruins shifted again. The faint sound of boots against stone, echoing through the air, a deliberate step. Heavy with purpose, the squad stiffened rifles aiming into the dust, their breaths sharp, their hearts clashing with fear and anticipation. The captain raised his hand once more, steadying them, yet his own breath betrayed the storm inside him. And in that instant they all understood the battle had not ended. With the mission it had only transformed into something darker, something unseen. And the sniper in the shadows was not finished with them, not by a single shot.